All right, everyone, welcome to Heal Thyself, episode number 8. We have been on fire. These past episodes have been moving fast. We've been helping a lot of people, educating a lot of people. Of course, the goal is empowering a lot of people, so empowering a lot of people and their children. So many posts on Instagram I'm seeing of moms putting up their children, eating different foods and a lot of the foods that are recommended and listening to the podcast. And another beautiful thing I see is people just grabbing all of these products that I'm mentioning that are toxic to you and your children, opening their garbage can and throwing it away. It's been sort of a little viral thing that's taken over. And it's really cool to see the effect of what we can do as people, speaking about how to empower ourselves and learning about what is not benefiting our health. All right. So today we have a lot to go over, really good stuff. I'm going to be dropping some bombs on the knowledge. I'm going to be going over some really good products, something that's been a demand and asked for since day one. And I have a best-selling author coming on as a special guest. So without further ado, why don't we just jump right into the Knowledge Bomb segment? All right, today's Knowledge Bomb is on something important. Okay, it's going to be on a heavy metal, but this heavy metal is important because it flows into our food supply, our water, the air. So why don't we learn about what this heavy metal is, what it does, where it's found, and how to cut it out of our lives or reduce it as best as possible. I'm talking about arsenic. Arsenic is present in food, and we need to know. Arsenic is one of the nastiest heavy metals out there. It's natural, but it seeps into our supply. It's found in the Earth's crust. It's in the water. It's in the air, food, soil, as I mentioned. There's two forms, right? You have the organic form and inorganic form. The inorganic form is the nasty one. That's the one that can make us really sick. There's the IARC. This is the group that basically classifies different substances on a grade of how carcinogenic they are to our health. And group 1 being the worst. Arsenic is considered a group 1 carcinogen, meaning that it's connected to cancers of the skin, of the bladder, and of the lungs. Not only that, it's implicated in diabetes, heart disease, organ damage, and developmental issues. Who's the most vulnerable population? Children. They're developing, they're vulnerable. If we're putting this into their bodies, it's going to affect them. Where is it found? Mostly in food and water. What foods? Rice, chicken. And I'm going to touch into the water too. I want to start with rice. Listen, I am Latin. Rice is a staple of our food. I've been eating rice forever. And there was a time where we were eating arroz. That's how we say it. We were eating arroz all the time. And I kind of strayed away from that when that whole low-carb fad came in when I was in college. And really, the only rice I would eat was brown rice. And I would eat chicken. Brown rice and chicken and some vegetables. And to me, that was the healthiest, right? From a macronutrient standpoint and a fitness standpoint, that's good. That's good stuff. The problem is I look at micronutrients. I look at toxicity. I look at what we're exposed to. I look at quality of food, all right? Macronutrients are just a sliver of health. We need to pay close attention to this. So I was eating so much rice, so much chicken without knowing the effects. So I'm going to go into really some major things about both so we can learn and then make decisions and shift. Just a quick shift. We don't have to stop everything, but we need to shift. So rice. Back in 2012, there was a Consumer Report investigation, right? And they looked at 60 varieties of rice. And what happened is they found most of the rice coming out in America had excessive amounts of arsenic. There was a study by the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey that found the urine, and in the urine of 3,633 rice eaters versus non-rice eaters. When they analyzed this, and in the urine, those who ate 2 servings of rice a day had 70% higher levels of arsenic in the urine versus those who did not. That's pretty incredible, right? Just the power of food and how it reflects on excretion in the urine. Rice accumulates 10 times higher arsenic than mostly other grains. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. What happens is usually when there's excessive arsenic in the soil, they plant rice in there to suck it up. So we know that once we have a bowl of rice, we are to be cautioned about the amount of arsenic in there. So if you look it up, if you go on Google, you can look up Consumer Reports, and it's called a 7-point system to look over how to find what servings are recommended for rice from this group. To put it in perspective, they're recommending half a cup of rice to three-quarters a cup of rice a week for adults, but then children no more than a quarter cup of rice. Now, that may shake some people because they may be giving their children much more rice than that. I know when I was little, I was eating more rice than that. How about rice cakes? Well, rice cakes, they recommend 3 to 5 per week for adults, and then for children, only 2 per week. Well, I see kids eating peanut butter, rice cakes with some raisins on it, some jelly on it. So let's pay close attention to this, right? Our kids, remember, as I mentioned, are more susceptible. What about rice milk? Well, they recommend that children under 5 shouldn't even be drinking rice milk. All right. Rice milk is super concentrated. It's more concentrated than these rice foods. So let's keep that in mind. And then babies, they recommend 1 serving of infant rice cereal per week, right, as an alternative to different ones. But infant rice cereal, the FDA is now putting a parts per billion number on it. I think it was 1,000 parts per billion that they recommend for infant rice cereal, 1,000 or 5,000. I have to recheck. But regardless, just keep this in mind. 1 serving of infant rice cereal. So if you have a baby, you shouldn't be giving them more than 1 serving, okay? What they found was rice from Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana had the highest amount of arsenic. Brown rice, interestingly enough, had 70% higher arsenic than white rice. Why? Because the outer layer concentrates. It's more than white rice. That doesn't mean start pigging out on white rice instead of brown rice. That means just be informed and know if you're going to have brown rice, have a serving, small serving, once or twice a week, and leave it be. They also found that the brown rice, when coming from Cali, Pakistan, and India, had lower than any other parts of the world. The lowest was found in California basmati rice. That's why I tell my patients if they want to continue eating rice to opt for California white basmati rice. That was the lowest, but also from India and Pakistan had lower. And sushi rice, interestingly enough, had low amounts of arsenic compared to other U.S. rices. As far as other options, why don't we just start exploring other grains if we're eating grains? Quinoa, much more nutrient dense, protein dense, mineral dense. Buckwheat, doesn't have wheat, don't have to worry about it with gluten, but buckwheat is an awesome grain that I traditionally eat, or I tend to eat a lot. Millet, amaranth. So here are other choices, okay? The thing is this, organic label doesn't make a difference in the amount of arsenic. Organic doesn't really account for the amount of concentration of heavy metals. So let's keep that in mind too. Organic does not make a difference in arsenic levels, but keep better in mind the foods that or the types of rice that I mentioned if you're going to be eating rice. There's also a tactic that can remove up to 30% of arsenic, and it's using 6 to 10 cups of filtered water per 1 cup of rice. So that's a lot more water than people usually use, but what they found is that if you cook it and then drain the water out, you can remove up to 30%, which is really cool. When it comes to water and arsenic, the best thing to do is get filtered water. I already mentioned about BPA in my other shows. So you shouldn't be drinking from plastic water bottles. That shouldn't be a habit. What you could and should be doing is having a water bottle or a water filter at home, like a Berkey, like a reverse osmosis system, and then putting it in glass or stainless steel and therefore drinking your water throughout the day. So keep that in mind. That's going to be able to remove the arsenic load from the water. Now, I want to get into something that is really interesting about arsenic and another food. When it comes to arsenic in chicken, it's been in chicken. Since 1944, the FDA started approving arsenic in the chicken feed. Why? Well, to reduce parasites in the meat. Okay, that makes sense. But then it's also to plump them up and also to give chicken that pink hue that looks so good when we buy chicken. And the drug company was Pfizer that made this deal, and they provided a drug called roxarsone. That roxarsone drug had arsenic in it, and they put it in the feed of chickens to, again, do those aforementioned things. But 75 to 80% of U.S. chickens were given roxarsone from 1944 to 2015. So that means if you were eating chicken between those times, and I know I was, from kid to teenager to young adult, then you were exposed to arsenic building in your body. So what happened was 65 years of this, the FDA said it was inactive. It's excreted in the feces of these chicken and it doesn't build up in the tissue. But in 2006, there was a study that showed that arsenic was in fact active. It was actually building up in the stored tissue of these chickens. And guess what? We were eating it and it was building up in our tissue. Even after that 2006 study, it took 5 whole years for the FDA to finally run their own test and have the same results. 5 years. So for those 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 10, 11, 5 years where we knew that arsenic was building up. It was proven, but the FDA finally said, okay, after those 5 years. So then Pfizer suspended the use of it. They said no more, but they still use it in other countries, of course. But still, even after that, nitarzone, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right, but nitarzone was still used for 4 more years in chicken feed, giving us arsenic. So not only that, not since, let's say, 2011, then we have 12, 13, 14, 2015. That's when arsenic stopped in the feed of these chickens. But it's still going through our environment. It still cycles in our environment. So what I want to show is this, the corruption. The corruption behind, since the 40s, this pharmaceutical company and the FDA approving this, and so many years throughout 1944 to 2011 showing and saying that this doesn't build up in our system, and then showing in a study that it does and taking 5 years to remove it finally from the system. So if you ate chicken from those years, which I know I did, you're exposed to arsenic. The nice thing is you can test for arsenic in different ways. Get in touch with a naturopathic or functional doctor. They can test your hair. They can do some urine tests. They can do some very sensitive blood tests to find out if you're exposed to arsenic and what level. But as I mentioned before, arsenic is connected to different diseases and predispositions to diseases. So why don't we just empower ourselves and start checking and then removing these things like the rice, or minimizing them, minimizing the chicken, and then getting that good water filter, and then boom, flushing that arsenic out of our system. All right, I hope that helped. I hope you learned something, and I hope that we can start making changes for our lives and our children's lives. Let's move on to our product review. Deodorants. This is by popular demand. It was asked nonstop, so why not? A lot of us have many questions about deodorants. So what I'm going to do today, look, I can't cover all the deodorants. I can't cover all the natural deodorants, all the crappy ones. But what I can tell you is what to look for and how to look for it, and give you some resources how to move forward about what you're putting under your arms, okay? So one of the first things I like to talk about with any deodorants is the difference between well deodorants and antiperspirants, right? A lot of these are antiperspirant deodorants, which actually stop you from perspiring, but make you smell good at the same time. And a lot of these natural ones are just deodorants, all right? Antiperspirants utilize aluminum. Aluminum is how they clog up your pores and kill those bugs that cause the sweating and the smell. And that's the way they execute their job. The problem is aluminum is a nasty metal, okay? So a lot of people go, I don't use aluminum deodorant because it causes cancer. Well, look, the consensus in studies, we can't say that it causes cancer directly, right? Because there's only a few studies that show the consensus is no. They say no in the science community, but it's based on a few studies. And they're not really well designed, so there's some conflicting evidence. But right now, does aluminum cause breast cancer? Science says no. The problem is this. It disrupts the bacteria. It's like an atomic bomb into that good. Look, probiotics are not just in our gut. They're hanging out in our skin, right? So disruptions of this ecological harmony of bacteria can cause a lot of issues, right? So most of the aluminum, actually, what they saw, builds up in what they call the upper outer quadrant. All right, so if you cut the pec or the breast into 4 sections, the upper outer quadrant, which is closest to the shoulder, that's where aluminum mostly builds up. Well, maybe not coincidentally, most breast cancers present in that side too. So look, I'm not saying aluminum causes breast cancer, but I am saying we need to be more careful about what we're putting under our arms, particularly women. Okay. Also, researchers found that there's high amounts of aluminum in cystic breast fluid when they open it up. Another thing. So, like, why don't we think about it this way? Is the body creating these cysts to siphon and hold in this excessive amount of aluminum that's building up in the body? And if that's the case, how incredible the body is. All right. So before I get started with these deodorants and antiperspirants, why don't we keep this in mind? There is a resource called the Environmental Working Group, and I talk about it all the time. But At this point, to me, they're doing the best work out there. And they have a database called the Skin Deep Database, right? And this may be repetitive. I know most of you may know this, but there's some of you that don't. So what you can do is type in your deodorant, type in your makeup, your concealer, your bronzer, whatever it is, shampoo. And you can get a report on where yours stands, right? And it's graded. And if any of your products come up with a red or even a yellow, think about moving them out. And if the number is in the green, that's what we want. We want green products coming in your body. They also have EWG certified products, which started a few years ago. This is nice because we know if it's EWG certified, it's clean. All right. So you can actually don't even have to type in your particular type of deodorant, but you can type in just deodorant on the top and it'll show you a grade of all the EWG certified ones and then all of the low numerical ones. That's really a nice resource, right? Because if you're at the supermarket or even you just want to take, you want to account for all of your products, you can do that by just typing it in there. All right. Let us start with the crappiest one. And I just grabbed this one, but really Secret, Degree, Dove, Mitchum, Old Spice, they're all the same. They're just versions of the same thing. But today I'm going to start with Secret Ultra Dry Vanilla, Vava Vanilla, with great marketing. They got a flower in here. It looks so natural, right? Invisible and solid. And it's a new formula. So, of course, who doesn't want new? Great marketing for a crappy product. So let me talk about this. First and foremost, we know that the active ingredient is aluminum. I just spoke about aluminum. It's an atomic bomb to the good flora under our arms, and it also potentially can build up in our system. All right. So aluminum is one thing already that I don't like about it. And then it has certain ingredients. The cool thing is back to that EWG Skin Deep database. You can type in this secret and it'll come up and then you can see the report on all of these ingredients, which is really cool. But the first one that's concerning is next to aluminum is cyclopentasiloxane. All right. And you may see this in all of the deodorants that I mentioned, right? All the other conventional ones. But this is expected to be harmful or toxic. The Environmental Canadian Domestic Substance List has it as harmful and toxic. And one or more animal studies show that it's connected to tumor formation in moderate doses. And also the same goes with endocrine disruption for your hormones and then neurotoxicity. All right. It also has mineral oil, and you'll see that in pretty much every single conventional one. And guess where that's coming from? Petroleum. All right. Petroleum. That's sludge, basically. And that's a toxic substance because petroleum is usually adulterated with other substances like benzene. We know benzene is a really nasty chemical. And this, when you look on Environmental Working Group, it says that it has expected organ toxicity, immune and allergic toxicant. So if you're sensitive, you're highly likely to be sensitive to this when it comes to allergies, but it's also going to suppress your immune system. Talc. Talc is another one that you'll find conventionally through the board. The problem is with talc is this. There's a big chance that it's contaminated with asbestos. There's actually a lot of data out there that shows that talc is usually contaminated with asbestos. Well, we know all those commercials. Have you came into contact with asbestos? You know, those lawyer commercials that you see in the middle of the day? Well, call, Robinson and Roberts, 1-800-asbestos. Well, there's a reason why, because it's connected to lung toxicity, all right? And there's a lot of data that shows this. In Canada, from what I understand, it's prohibited and restricted in any of the cosmetic ingredients. They take out talc because they know. And talc was actually implicated in various lawsuits for different companies. If you look it up, you can Google it and research it. I won't talk further about it, but there's expected organ toxicity and additive amounts of toxic exposure. So the more you use it, it builds up in toxin. What about fragrance? I mean, I spoke about that before. And we know fragrance is an umbrella term for thousands and thousands of different chemicals. So on the Environmental Working Group Skin Deep database, the fragrance is an 8 out of 10. All right, so it's known to cause allergies. It's an immunotoxicant, meaning it's like a forest fire on your immune system, and that's shown in multiple studies. And then we have respiratory toxicant. It's an irritant to the respiratory system, and it just messes up the ecological system too, right? So it's an environmental toxin. Look, Secret, as I mentioned, Degree, Dove, Mitchum, Old Spice, all these conventional deodorants in a vacuum without any toxins in your food and your water and anything else you're putting on your body, yeah, your body, your liver, your kidneys, your lungs, your skin, it'll detoxify, it'll leave. But the problem is we have to think about toxic loads. All right, so this is not to scare anyone, it's just to empower us and make moves. Let's start shifting the perspective. All right, let's shift gears and go to some better ones. All right, next one I'm gonna talk about is the one, you see, Tom's always falls right in the middle. When I spoke about toothpaste, it's one of those toothpaste that, yeah, if you have it at your dad's house that you're visiting in Long Island, then go ahead and use it. If it's something that you found in your bottom of your drawer and you're running out of the house and you need deodorant, sure, use it. Here's why. Look, Tom's is transparent when it comes to their website. They'll tell you where everything comes from, and they're proud of it. But sometimes I question why. A lot of the ingredients they use they're pretty good, but some things that concern me, I'd like to talk about. First and foremost, like all of the Tom's products, they'll tell you they're not animal tested, which is beautiful. I really do support that. I think it's terrible how we animal test. And then it uses no artificial colors, flavors, fragrances, or preservatives. Much better already, 10 steps ahead of Secret, maybe 11. And then they share every ingredient. Yes, they do. I've seen that. Sustainable practices, and they strive to maximize recycling and recyclability. So they're eco-conscious, which is wonderful. The problem is a few things. One of the major ingredients for deodorants is propylene glycol or propanediol, and they mix that with sodium stearate, and that forms like the base of the deodorant. So Tom's uses propylene glycol, but it's derived from corn. It doesn't say anything about non-GMO corn being used. And you know how I feel about GMOs. I've been talking about them since day one on this show in 2010 in med school. Right? I have a lot to say about them. So the problem, like always with Tom's, is that they're transparent and proud about telling you their ingredients, but they're not really sourcing the best ingredients, right? So it's coming from corn and no guarantee that it's non-GMO corn. Is it organic? I don't know, Tom. Why don't you tell me? Glycerol laurate, again, something that comes from vegetable oils. From where? What vegetables? Soy? Corn? Right, so a little bit more transparency. So it's, like I said, this is why it puts it in the middle of the road, not to be used every single day. Now, at least the fragrance they use, as they mentioned, they don't use synthetic fragrance. They're using plant oil fragrance. Great, I'm for it, all right? And the ascorbic acid comes from fruits and not, sewer sludge and mold growth. So like I said, look, Tom, not an everyday thing, but I need Tom to be more transparent. All right, let us go to my favorites. These are my favorites that I have on hand, but there's so many other good ones, right? And this is, like I said, where the resource comes in, the Skin Deep database, right? You type in deodorant, you get a huge list of EWG certified deodorants and the ones with the lowest number of toxicity. Really cool stuff. So the ones I have at hand are the ones that I saw at Whole Foods. I do use one of them fairly regularly, but let's start with the All Good one. All right, All Good. So on the Environmental Working Groups database, it's a 1, so it's the lowest. And the nice thing I use, I think I'm getting older. I can't even see this really. All right, I got to get some better contacts. I know I do. All right, so what we see is this. Look, propanediol, as I mentioned, remember Tom's uses propylene glycol. Propanediol mixes with sodium stearate, and that forms the base of the deodorant. They use this, but as opposed to Tom's, where it's coming from, because they tell you that it's coming from non-GMO sugarcane, all right? Non-GMO sugarcane, not genetically modified corn, not genetically modified soy. And then the rest of their ingredients are organic and coming from plants, arrowroot, melaleuca, which is tea tree oil, but it's organic, okay? It's using basil oil, organic. It's using neem, organic. This is nice. Frankincense, organic. So the oils for the scents that they're using are coming from high quality, right? It's really nice to see that. And it's not tested on animals, which I'm a big fan of in the first place. But this is how it should be. No aluminum, no propylene glycol, no parabens, not deriving their ingredients from genetically modified, and no other chemicals. And when they do put in the scents, like the oils, you know that they're organic. So that's what you want to look for. You want to see that it's organic ingredients. You want to see where they're deriving all of these constituents for this deodorant. The other one, and the one that I tend to use, is Schmidt's. Schmidt's was bought out by a really big company. I don't remember which one, but I know that I need the sensitive one because a lot of people were complaining about the baking soda used in Schmidt's, but they have a sensitive skin formula, and they came out with a longer list of them actually, because I think it was across the board. A lot of people were really complaining about it. But again, this, in my opinion, is not as good as the All Good one, but they do have some really clean, natural ingredients. They use coconut oil, and a lot of the scents that they use are plant derived, which, you know, that's always beautiful to see, right? Not fragrance. There's no fragrance in here. But the thing about Schmidt's is they don't always guarantee that it's organic. I don't see anything about organic, actually. But it has no aluminum, no propylene glycol, no artificial fragrances. For me, this works well. I'm not a really big sweater in the first place, but it smells good. It lasts throughout the day. And I think that's a big problem with a lot of people when it comes to deodorant. They worry if it's going to last all day. But look, when you compare it to conventional antiperspirant deodorants, yeah, you could put one application in the morning because it's toxic, because it's suppressing your sweat, because it's chemicals flowing through your body, right? Versus something that's more natural, yeah, you may need to reapply it once or twice in the day. That's okay. So look, these are the ones that I got my hands on. But like I said, go on the Environmental Working Group Skin Deep database, type in, and start researching. I also cycle with the Schmidt's. I use Corpus, and Corpus has all plant-derived ingredients, and it's a really good one. And I love the smell, actually, of those the most. They have a nice line. Let's see if I can think of any. No, I can't think of any others off the top of my head. But like I said, you can go online and check and start changing your deodorant if you're using one of these conventional ones, all right? So look, that's the whole thing that we do here. We chip away, right? So next week, we're going to do some other good ones. Next week, the week after, we're going to do some really good ones too. But it's empowering you all, okay? Boy, am I excited for this next segment. We have a best-selling author. She is so good on the mic. You guys better get ready for this one, all right? So let's move on to the next segment. Today's special guest, one of my favorite people. I've been following her for quite a while. She is changing the game when it comes to hormones, female hormones, and everything else around that. Dr. Jolene Brighten.
In the house.
In the house. She's in the house. You were holding that for quite a while, right?
No, I wasn't. But then it just felt like a good setup, and it's like T-ball. You don't not swing when the ball's just sitting there ready for you.
Well, you have to hit that home run. So we were just talking about my cups, and I want to bring this to light because these cups are just always hanging out on the table.
So good.
This is the nerdy one.
There's the plant cell, the animal cell. We've got DNA on there, and then you guys can't see. There's like monkey to man, like
evolutionary change. This is like the cup when it comes to all cups.
Look at that. I know. There's even photosynthesis going on. But you got Freddie Mercury. It's a hard call. Which one's better?
Yeah, my whole vibe is like art and science. So why not just, I love Freddie Mercury. Who doesn't love him?
Totally. That's actually how my house is decorated. There's like skulls. There's DNA. There's actually anatomically correct hearts, like all throughout, and like, but artistically done. And there's actually my son for a present bought me this like heart anatomically correct candle, and he gets upset because I won't burn it.
Because it's too nice.
Yeah, no, I'm like, somebody they made wax into a heart. You don't just burn that, but apparently you're supposed to use candles. That's the thing.
Not when they're aesthetically pleasing. No, you don't. You keep it as art, and you have the art vibe. It sounds like.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be in Portland. So let me meet up with you, and we'll do a good brunch or something.
Oh,
like
yeah,
that, right?
totally.
And any listeners or viewers, again, we want to hear some good recommendations over there for good spots to eat, right?
Oh, yeah. So I have to say, do you know Nom Nom Paleo, Michelle Tam?
No.
Oh my God, you should know her. So she has I have a story to tell you about the time we met and I had food poisoning. It was terrible. But she's a good friend now. And I actually told her about my favorite brunch spot, which is Radar. And I love it. The Dr. Brighten special. They will bring you a plate of bacon that they do from pig all the way through in their restaurant and black coffee. And that's like my jam.
That's your jam?
Yeah, I'm like, go in on a Sunday morning. I'm like, just feed me bacon and coffee and tell me I'm pretty. Let's go. But I told her about it, and I was like, this is my super secret brunch spot. And she went, and then she blew it up on Instagram because she's got like a gazillion followers and everything. And then suddenly the place was packed.
Yeah, so no more secret.
No more secret. But the funny thing is that like there's so many times I've been in there while I walk in. Lily's the owner, good friend of mine, and she's like, your fans are here. Like, can you go say hi to them? So people actually do this thing where they go to Portland and they eat where I eat. And it's like people actually go in and they're like, maybe I'll see Dr. Brighten here.
Yeah.
And the first time it happened, I was like, now I'm super self-conscious of like, I don't want people to see me eating. Like, I'm that girl in high school of like, I don't want to eat and people see me eat. And like, but it was so bizarre. I was like sitting there with my family and yeah, my response is always like, I'm not as cool as you think I am. I just don't want to let you down there.
Yeah, none of us are. I'm far from cool, trust me.
Totally.
You can see how nerdy I am by that cup you have in your hand.
I know, I love it. And we matched like pastels today.
This was
that
not
wasn't
planned.
even planned. We were just like, whatever, April,
Well,
let's
look,
do
yeah,
this.
we're transitioning to spring. Like we might as well be celebrating with the way we present ourselves with these colors. So
Totally.
So okay, look. Your book is on fire right now. Beyond the Pill. Literally, it's every time I go on Instagram, there's something that says Beyond the Pill or a quote from it or, oh, did you read this chapter? And the nice thing is it's set up so somebody can open it up and can just jump from chapter to chapter, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just beginning to end like that. That's awesome resources, but you always encourage, this is a chock full of information beginning to end, right?
Oh, yeah. And I wrote it, I came at it a couple of ways. One was, I didn't want this to be a health book that you read, a couple of years it's obsolete, or you just you bought this book. Here's my thought. I was like, trees. We all love them. If we're going to print a book, make sure that book stays with that woman for life. And so I wrote it so it can be a resource over and over, but I also designed it as a choose your own adventure as well, where, what we do is so individualized. How do you put that into a book? And one way I did that was with quizzes. And so what I tell women is you can get in and get out. You can get in, take the quiz, identify this is my hormone imbalance, go right to the section you need to read, start working on that. And when you start feeling better, then go into the rest of the book. You can read it front to back. There have been lots of women who still message me, and it's like flattering, and then at the same time, I'm like, that's not good. And they're like, I got your book. It was so good. I stayed up all night. I just stayed up straight through the night, read the whole thing. And I'm like, that's awesome. My ego is like, yeah. And then my doctor self is like, wait a minute, but did you read the part about sleep and like how important that is? Mm-hmm. So it is something that like I will say that my publishers took a big chance on me. A book like this has never been written. And so it's never been proven tested in the market before. And when I told them, they were like, yeah, of course we want people to read it front to back. And I'm like, okay, so you have estrogen dominance and PMS and you figure that out like, 20 pages in, and then it says, and then read 300 pages to find the solution. I'm like, what this one will do is rip the book in half and throw it across the room and curse my name like day in and day out. Like we're not doing that.
And go on Google or something, right? And just search there.
Yeah, and totally go to Google. And so instead I designed it so you can take the quiz, get in, get out, get the information you need. If you want to spend time reading through it, if you are someone who is a troublemaker, I welcome that. You can go in and be like, why do I really want to eat that broccoli? Mm-hmm. I'm going to outline that for you. What do I really need to poop every day? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you do. Mm-hmm. I got a whole chapter on why.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love something that really ties us together in our approaches and philosophies and passions is that informed consent is such a major, major highlight in people's care, right? And I've heard a few podcasts for over time with you on it, and you always talk about informed consent because it's so important.
Yeah.
Do women who go to the doctor get informed consent before they get on a pill?
That is just the rub right there, is that because hormonal birth control has become so ubiquitous in our society, I actually say like a doctor would pass you the pill before they pass you sugar. Like people are like, they hand it out like candy. I'm like, with what we know about sugar, nobody's going to pass you candy as quick as they might pass you the pill. And part of that is because they believe very much at their core that this will fix your problem. So if you're a doctor and you've got a pill and it fixes every female ill, why would you not want to pass that to her? But the problem is on the upstream, It's not that the doctors are bad. It's that like we don't have the education taking place to really inform doctors what does hormonal birth control do. Like the stuff that's in my book is after me sitting in PubMed for hours, hours upon hours of clinical practice and bringing all of that together that I'm like, I was never taught these things about hormonal birth control. And when I talk with doctors of all backgrounds, they often don't know what the pill can do to a woman's body. So no, women are not given the full story. And part of that is because it's seen as something benign, or the way it's taught to doctors is like, some women have strokes, but it's really, really low. It's not even worth discussing. No big deal. And it's like, well, maybe, unless, as I talk about in my book, she has a genetic mutation that puts her at higher risk. Like I've seen women as teenagers in their 20s who've had a stroke, who've had a clot. Like this does happen. And when we talk about statistical significance, there's the statistical significance from the research perspective, and there is, statistically speaking, it's a mild increased risk, like breast cancer. However, we're talking about breast cancer. Like we have to frame it in what we are talking about. It's not like, oh, this many women might lose their hair. Like it sucks to lose your hair, but you don't die if you lose your hair. Breast cancer, stroke, heart attack, diabetes, it impacts you, it impacts society, impacts everyone in your life. So no, we're not given the full story. And a big reason for that is because doctors aren't given the full story before they're ever taught to prescribe it.
Yeah, and I think that's a loaded question as to why they're not getting the full story. That's another conversation and podcast.
Well, and I think, but one thing worth noting about why aren't they getting the full story is they got a lot to learn. I mean, we've been through medical school. There's a lot to learn. And when it comes to women's health and what gynecologists are learning, like they're usually OB gynecologists, so they're also catching babies. Like there's a lot to learn. And with hormonal birth control, it's something that it's like they learn like kind of the surface stuff, but it doesn't go as deep. And the other issue is that it challenges on some level this idea that hormonal birth control is part of the women's movement, and so it's a woman's right to have access. And so it's been a long time that it's like you're not even supposed to question it. I mean, when I first started talking about this, the number of haters I got that were like, you're anti-women, you're anti-this, you're anti-that, and I'm like, no, the reality is that I'm pro-informed consent, and you having all the information. Whatever you choose at the end of the day, it's not my business as your doctor to like tell you how to live your life, but if you choose to take the pill or get an IUD, I need to give you the full story, the PAR Q, and then I need to monitor you and make sure that you're safe while you're on it. And that's what I did in the book, is I'm like, here's what your doctor should test. This is what they should investigate. Like, if you have period problems that your doctor would prescribe the pill, here's what you should investigate. If you choose to use it, totally fine. You have that right to manage your symptoms, but if it's PCOS, you should know that first.
Yeah. And so let me play devil's advocate. What if I'm a doctor and I'm like, well, I've been practicing for a long time, and every pediatric patient or teenage patient I have, it gets rid of their cystic acne. Aren't I doing a good job by giving them the pill? What's going on here?
Yeah, so that's another area of miseducation that is taught to doctors, and doctors perpetuate, is the pill will fix your hormones, fix your period, fix your acne. And to that, whenever a woman will say to me, no, but I went on the pill and it did fix my acne. Now, mind you, some women, they get acne for the first time, or it gets a lot worse being on it. My question to them is, what happens when you stop? Well, when I stop, it comes right back, or it's even worse. And I actually see acne is one of the number one symptoms of post-birth control syndrome that drives women right back on birth control. Because nobody wants to be 30-something or 40-something looking like they're 14. It sucks. It definitely does. And it's something that, like, in medicine, we're like, okay, well, you're not going to die. This is not emergent. But, like, on an emotional and mental level, it does feel emergent. Like, this is my face that everybody sees. And with post-pill acne, it doesn't just hang out on the face for most women. It's like neck knee, back knee, butt knee, like chest knee, like all the acnes. And so, I will hear from doctors that are like, this fixes that. But does it? How can something really fix like acne when it actually is hitting the root cause and making it worse? So what I mean by that is, with acne, so as we know in our background, acne is usually the last thing to heal. Body prioritizes other organs, but it also has a root cause. So maybe it's that you don't have enough zinc and vitamin A and there's immune system issues going on. Well, hormonal birth control is depleting that. Maybe it's because you have gut dysbiosis and an imbalance in good gut bugs or leaky gut going on, what's known as intestinal hyperpermeability in the research. oh, birth control causes that as well. And so when we start looking at what's going on, like why does birth control work for some women's acne? Because it's super good at suppressing your testosterone. Fantastic, except what about your muscle mass, and what about your libido, and what about your bone and your brain and all the other tissues testosterone affects? And so it is very much, it's a paradigm shift in philosophy to think that just because symptoms went away, you actually fix the underlying cause. And I'm sure this is something that you see with your patients that I try to explain to women all the time, is like, just because they cut out a body part doesn't mean they address the root cause. So you had a hysterectomy because at the root cause, your liver was making too much 16-hydroxyestrone. So this really potent estrogen stimulating growths in your uterus, making your period heavy. So they took your uterus out. But wait a minute, your liver's still doing what it's doing. So what is happening now? Now your breasts are being hit with all of that. By the way, they were being hit all along with that estrogen, but it didn't fix the root cause and didn't address that. And maybe for where you were at in your pathology, it was time to remove that organ. But this is something where it also raises the question of respect in women's medicine, where it is perfectly fine to shut down our reproductive system. Like, it is perfectly fine to shut down our system, remove our organs, and we're just supposed to go on with life. And it was interesting. There was an actual animal study that came out at the end of 2018 showing that these rodents that had their uterus removed could not actually get through a maze. So we're understanding now that we've been cutting out women's genital region. We've been cutting out all kinds of parts, but taking out uterus, and it may actually interplay with the brain. And we're just now figuring that out.
Yeah, and how behind we are to just, in many ways, I could being in cancer, sometimes I think 100 years from now, if they look back and they go, that was really barbaric, the way we used to just cut off pieces and organs and limbs. It's pretty incredible because we don't have all the answers. We're just starting to understand what the gut microbiome does, right? How do we not know the connections between, as you mentioned, the uterus and the brain, right? Or the breast and the brain, or liver and the brain, right? There's so much more to learn and know. And you're right, it's not be all end all. It's not, okay, this is where the pathology is. Let's take a magnifying glass or a microscope and just take it out there and you should be fine now.
Yeah. Well, and that's where we got to look at, what does it really take to be great physicians? What does it take to be great scientists? It's curiosity and humility. And it's recognizing that our patients teach us that we don't know everything and that we have to remain curious, and also humble that, like, we get it wrong in medicine. Like, we used to take out the appendix. Whoops, like taking out organs, man, we don't have a great track record with that. But like, that we learned from that and we do better. Like, I've been in health, wellness, the medical arena for over 20 years. Like, I remember when the microbiome was a bunch of freeloaders who gave us a little bit of B12, vitamin K, but other than that, like, didn't do much. And now look what we know. And this is where we just have to stay curious and humble enough to recognize we haven't conquered anything. We haven't learned everything. And there is no proof. That's kind of, my husband is going to listen to this and he's going to be like, that's her pet peeve, you guys, is when people are like, we proved this, we're moving on. And it's like, no, because we really never prove anything. We demonstrate and we show in the research and we validate. But to prove is just like close the book and say we're done and walk away. And we never want to do that. We want to stay open to all those things. I mean, we're just now learning about, like, for a long time we were like, oh, yeast is the worst and you don't want it in your body. And it's like, as we know, it's commensal organisms. And now we're understanding, oh, there's actually this whole fungal version of the microbiome going on. What does that do?
Yeah, I mean, look, we co-evolved with so many bugs for so long. They're here for a reason, right? Of course, overgrowth and pathogenic processes because of that is one thing. But we have to have an understanding that we can't just throw atomic bombs at things thinking that we're doing right by something because one study came out demonstrating, not proving. And I agree so wholeheartedly with you that there is no proof that this, and that, especially in the oncology arena, right? We think we've proved one thing and another thing. But if a tumor grows, what's the reason why? We never question that. We just go, well, this is the end result and it's bad and a tumor will kill you. But people are so quick to cut it out without understanding why or even questioning why. And the same goes with the every hormonal dysfunction. Why? What's the root cause?
Totally. And with what you're saying there, when people start saying like, well, allopathic medicine is the best because of this and that, or naturopathic medicine or functional medicine or, Chinese medicine. And what we have to recognize is that everybody has a time and a place. And I'm really, really grateful for acute medicine. I mean, that's the allopathic really philosophy is like, are you dying right now? How do we stop that? Or just does this need to be taken out? Like, thank goodness we have great surgeons, but when we try to shift everything into one philosophy and prove it to be the best and it's the number one, we neglect that like there's a different perspective and different way of looking at things. I'm afforded the personality type of the Myers-Briggs that will argue all sides of everything, whether I agree with it or not, just to come to an understanding of like what is the best viewpoint to be taking in all of this. And that's where like when we're talking about oncology, it's absolutely where you need to know why. How did this party get started in the first place? And like maybe you do need a surgeon to, remove a part of your body. Maybe you do need chemo. Maybe you do need the gamut. And thank goodness, what are all these? They're tools. When you go to your tool shed, would you be like, yo, I hate that hammer. I don't even want to look at that hammer. Like, what if you need the hammer? Like, we want to have all the tools available and use the right tool at the right time, but never stop asking why, because it's not enough. And I really wish it was. I mean, I wish it was as simple as just being like, just remove your lady parts and you'll be fine. And like, it's just not that simple.
Yeah, it's not. It's so complex. And again, the question is informed consent. How are we moving forward, right? Because we only see one set of tools. And we have to be informed that, hey, you can do this. Hey, look at this one, right? And that's the beautiful part about even integrative teams, right? Because you have different forms of expertise bringing up different perspectives and moving forward in many different ways. But anyway, one thing that I was I was listening to your story with your period issues growing up, and I was so intrigued.
Where I talk about my vagina in my book. That's probably one of the hardest things I've ever done professionally.
But we were just talking about the line between professional and like out there and real, and I'm sure that your readers and listeners, if it's on audio too, no? Yeah, so readers and listeners appreciate that. That's the realness coming out of you, right? Like the bond with you. So you suffered a lot, right, with your periods growing up. And you were given birth control. For how many years did you do it?
10. How many years did you do it? I did it for 10.
10 years. Okay. And when you got off, would you say that there was a suppression of symptoms over time and over time?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, and we learned in naturopathic school.
So much I didn't know.
Yeah. There's rebounds, right?
Yeah.
Rebound, the body rebounds. You start putting dust under a rug, and all of a sudden that rug explodes with the dust coming back out.
Totally.
So, what did you experience when you came off?
Yeah, so I just want to say though, like it was super great to be past the pill and get a break from like 7+ day periods and extreme pain. Now, mind you, now I know what I know. I'm like, oh, those elevated prostaglandins. I needed more magnesium, omega-3 fatty acids, and I needed to support estrogen clearance and detoxification. And I still don't judge myself. And so for every woman listening, because women always, they come to this place where they arrive at a better understanding of their body and they're like, oh, I should have done all that differently. And it's like, yeah, that'd be nice. But like, we're here now. Let's move forward with tomorrow. So when I came off of hormonal birth control, why it's important that people know that I had these such painful, terrible periods that I dread, I counted them down like doomsday on my calendar. So I knew they were regular. I had a period from 14 until I was almost 18. So I was in my latter 17 that I started the pill. And so I knew I had regular cycles. When I came off, I lost my period. And my mom's side of the family is a big Hispanic family. Like everybody has kids before age 20. Everybody has more than one child. Like fertility is not an issue. And we make jokes that all you have to do is look at a Latina and she will get pregnant. And so with that, when I went to my doctor and I lost my period, it was a gaslighting kind of situation where he was like, you're misremembering. This is probably how it always was. You have PCOS because your period is gone and now you have cystic acne. And I'm like, I never had acne before and I had regular periods. Like this was never an issue. To which, he convinced me this, like, he'd never seen it before. And that what I was describing, no one had ever experienced in his clinical practice. To that, I look back and I'm like, you either had a really bad bedside manner or you weren't listening, because I thought I was a freak. Now, thank goodness I had a background in nutritional biochemistry and clinical nutrition and was in naturopathic medical school learning about herbal medicine, and I integrated all these things. I got my period back. I was able to clear my skin. When my period did come back, it came back with a vengeance, and I talk about this in my book of like, you think that you would want to die less when you bleed through your pants in a room full of future doctors, but no, it was just like being like, I just remember Mr. Atkins, if you're still alive, in 8th grade at my elementary school, I still remember sitting in that plastic chair in that room knowing that I bled through my clothes and being like, I have to wait for everyone to leave the room and I still don't know how I'm going to get to the bathroom. And this is the 90s. So you guys, I totally had overalls on, and I remember just unclipping my overalls so they would hang over the back of me to get there. And like I would travel with extra clothes in my bag. I would tie a sweatshirt around. Like, thank you for that style. That little fashion trend, I could tie a sweatshirt around my waist. Our fashion was like kind of awful then, but whatever, it worked for period problems. But so with that, when my period did come back, that's what it was like. Again, it was super, super heavy. And then when I finally got that normalized, I will say I did many of the dumbest things I've done through my 20s. This is why don't judge yourself in your 20s or as a teenager. But I got a copper IUD. Don't get a copper IUD if you have a history of painful or heavy periods. But I was stubborn and I didn't want to get pregnant and I didn't trust fertility awareness method. And then I got that, and that was just like downhill. It was like, the periods became so heavy I became anemic because I was also a vegetarian at the time, not eating. I mean, iron's not as bioavailable in plant sources as it is in meat. So it was like a combination of that going on. But that was my experience. And it wasn't until I got into clinical practice that I came to understand the majority, if not all of women, struggle in some way to come off of hormonal birth control. And I also made the observation of like, why is it that these patients are coming to me and their food sensitivities are increasing and they're doing everything right and they can't clear gut infections? And it was when I got into the research and I'm like, hold up. The pill acts like an antibiotic in your gut, but we stay on it for decades, not 10 days. Like, we're on it for 10 years at a time. And it really, as I went through all this research and working with my patients, in a lot of ways, I was able to heal myself as well from that kind of emotional standpoint and start to understand that, like, all those gut issues I had gut issues as a kid. I resolved them. Then I got on the pill. Then like 5 years later, I can't tolerate eggs. I started having all these problems. Nobody's talking about food sensitivities then in a big way. So, but just to look back and be like, wow, I didn't have any libido through my 20s and I thought something was wrong with me and my doctor told me that was normal. And as it turns out, the pill does that, and it actually changes your liver at the genetic level to express more sex hormone binding globulin, which grabs onto your testosterone and shuts down your libido.
Yeah. Whoa, that was really good. I was just, very few and far between because I can talk for days.
I have to take off my jacket though.
I'm
gonna like admit
the fire
right
is
now.
Coming out.
Well, I'm like having that PTSD story. I'm like, I'm sweating now.
Yeah. That's the fire coming out. It was. I find it so interesting, the digestive or the gut microbiome, and hormonal birth control, because it's quite often that I see women who are actively on birth control who have issues with their bowels, who have issues with bloating and heartburn, and issues after eating. Every time I eat a bowl of rice, corn, soy, whatever it is they're eating, they're always having mounting food intolerances and sensitivities. So it's really, really interesting the way that's all connected, right? The liver, the gut microbiome. If every doctor knew that it acted like an antibiotic, I wonder if things would change.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're in a difficult position because the right to control your reproductive health has absolutely been part of why we graduate college at a higher rate, why women are CEOs and running for president now. Like, we have made major progression. In fact, one study attributed, they said the pill had contributed to a 30% increase in wages, women getting paid more. So it's a tricky thing. We still need to be able to control our reproductive health. The other thing is that there's still this squabbling on whether or not women are telling the truth. So when it comes to the depression correlation, we can't say causation because of the way the research is being done. And so that causes doctors and scientists to step up every time a new study comes out, doesn't matter how big it is. And they're like, yeah, that's not causation, therefore it's not real. And it's like, you really need a study to believe hundreds of thousands of women who've been on the pill alone, not to mention everything else that we've seen. And there's research coming out. I mean, if we just look at like, if you subscribe to the serotonin deficiency, like that philosophy of why we get depressed, then you can understand that you need to metabolize your tryptophan correctly to make serotonin, and you need your B vitamins, magnesium, all of this to run neurotransmitters.
Which is being depleted.
Depleted by the pill. Yeah. And in fact, there is a study that showed that tryptophan metabolism is altered when a woman's on the pill, so much so that she makes neurotoxins while she's on it. So while she's on it, she makes toxins in her brain. That progestin potentially increases free radical production in her brain. The brain at a structural level is different on an MRI scan if you're on hormonal birth control versus a woman who's not. And it's inflammatory, which we know that cytokines alone can contribute to depression.
Exactly.
We don't, like, at this point, I'm like, we don't need a study that says, this is true, therefore believe women. No. We actually need to start asking why her and not her. Because something's going on. Why one woman starts the pill and is like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me and I feel amazing. And then this other woman starts the pill and within a week, she can't even get out of bed. She's like, has debilitating depression. Like, there are variations happening, and we are at a place where we need to start exploring, like, why her, not her, so that we can be better in our informed consent. But it's a tricky thing of like, I think that if you know that the pill can decimate the microbiome, then one thing you can do is you can tell your patient, track your symptoms, your gut symptoms ahead of time. Let's get you on a quality probiotic, be rotating that. Let me teach you about eating prebiotics. Like, how do you actually optimize the terrain? That's stuff that I go through in my book. And, you know, if you can do all of that, then you stand a better chance to be on this medication, because we don't know what's going on in her life. And when I was in naturopathic medical school, I did 2 years rotation in a homeless youth clinic. High risk for sexual assault, women who are, you know, really menstrual inequality hits them really hard. Like affording tampons, like things you've probably never thought about, but tampons are expensive, pads are expensive. And so for these women to get a depot shot and know, I don't have to deal with my period for 3 months, and like, I'm not going to get pregnant if something happens, it's super, super valuable. But who would I be to be like, that depot shot's gonna mess with your brain and it can do all this stuff? Like, and that's something about working in a high risk population with that. It's all about risk mitigation and how can you lower the risk. So this is also a population that used drugs, and they'd be IV drug users. And so we had a clean needle exchange. There are people out there that want to judge them like crazy, but you know what? Like, it's like, we ain't got time to be judging other people, okay? We got our own work to do, but it's something where it's like, coming from that place, people are always like, how are you not anti-birth control and not pro, like, how can you be middle of the road like that? I'm like, because it's not my body, it's not my choice, and I've actually had my formative medical years really in that, okay, whatever you choose is your choice. Let me help lower the risk for you and inform you about it.
Exactly, the informed consent part. It's so important, because if you empower people enough, they'll make a decision based on, hopefully, all the information that they have. And I think that's missing a big part. One thing I find interesting is a woman will go on birth control and they'll go, finally, no more periods. I'm good.
I know.
And
I've been there. I did like 2 years of like no periods. I was like, I'm smarter than my body.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think anyone in the world is smarter than the body.
No. It's like we have, we wish.
Right? Isn't nature so perfect that it creates a period for a particular reason, and we're suppressing it and celebrating that we can suppress it? What about those? I want to tell you something. I was at dinner the other day, and we were just chatting after dinner. And it's actually, if you're here, go to Gracias Madre. It's vegan Mexican food, but it's really good.
Oh, really?
Check it out. You may love it.
Do you see my little skepticism there?
I know.
Like a little bit skeptical, but I'm game to try.
It's. What is your Latin background?
It's Hispanic, yeah. My grandmother's from, I actually grew up in the back of a Mexican food restaurant.
So
that's where the little like.
Yeah, I know, I see.
I don't know, in my Instagram stories, so I will go to Whole Foods or somewhere, and like, I think Trader Joe's is close. So I'll go somewhere like that, and I'll get like Applegate, sandwich meat, and then broccoli sprouts or cruciferous sprouts. And I call these like my healthy taquitos. But I was sharing that like a couple months ago, and I was like, if my grandma saw me say this, she would slap me silly.
Yeah,
she would be like, no, now? What did you
Old
just
school.
say?
I know.
Yeah.
It's funny
That better be
because
some corn and lard up in there.
yeah, like a lot of lard too.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is better than canola oil, everybody.
Oh, much better. And pretty much anything's better than canola oil at this
Yeah.
point. Okay, yeah. So back to the story. We're sitting at a table and we're chatting. This was recently. And somehow the conversation got like, oh, what do you do like on the side when you're not doing this and this and that? So I talked about what I love to do. But then we got to one of the women at the table and she goes, I love to just track my cycle. And I was like, huh? And the way she expressed it, I
Yeah.
was like, wow.
I'm like so excited right now.
This was my first time, 34 years I think I am. First time ever
You don't know
hearing.
how old you are.
I try to forget after 30,
It's
right?
been a
We
long
just
day
go with the
in
flow. Yeah,
clinical practice.
Exactly. So, but hearing that is so empowering because I go, wow, this is a woman who really is so in touch. This is what she said. I'm so in touch with my body now. Mm-hmm. And first time ever, I said the power of a cycle, a woman's cycle, and what it means to the woman. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that? Because this blew my mind away. Yeah, in your expertise.
Yeah, well, we need to flip the script. And this is something that, I got the story, my mom got the story, my grandma got the story, and I led myself really, all the way up through almost my 30s with this story of like, periods are inherently awful. They are the focal point. Suppress them, do whatever you can to get rid of them. When in reality, it's ovulation that's the focal point. And that's what we're really suppressing is ovulation. And that's why when you have a bleed on a pharmaceutical, that's a withdrawal bleed. So when you get into that placebo week, it's a withdrawal bleed. And it's a medication-induced period, but you didn't ovulate. So it's not a true menstrual cycle. And, it's actually, I've had this conversation with my girlfriends of like how sad I am because in the next 10, 15 years, I'm not going to have a period anymore. And yet I spent like a good 10 years suppressing it and even more time hating on it and not realizing that hormones are really meant to give us superpowers and that you can work with your body throughout the month. And so, it's something that like, if you look at ovulation alone, look at the research, look at the studies on strippers. They actually make more money while they're ovulating. And if you are a stripper and you are on the pill or any form of hormonal birth control, you make less tips. Like men perceive these differences, but women also perceive these differences being in their body. So as you're gearing up towards ovulation and your estrogen is rising, less fine lines and wrinkles, more curves, your lips are a lot fuller, so you feel like you just feel a lot sexier. Your testosterone starts rising. That's not just about libido. That is like your kick-ass, like get things done kick-ass. That's when we'll see energy come up as well. When progesterone gets just right, it stimulates the GABA receptor in your brain. Now you want to hang out with your friends, your community, be really connected, and you feel really chill and calm. You love your life. And then as that starts to diminish, you go a little more internal and withdrawn. This is where society gets it wrong in that they're like, oh, you're feeling a little bit tired and you don't want to hang out with your friends, you're broken, something's wrong. Because it's very much of like, this is how a man operates, this is how a man works, same, like whatever. And society's not set up to give permission to say, great, now it's time to go within. Like spend some time inside, be internal. As your period comes, it's a great time to start evaluating where you're at, releasing things you don't need, especially if you're on that new moon cycle where you bleed with the new moon. I mean, that's darkness. That is, what does every animal on the planet do? And if it's not a nocturnal creature, it is going inside. It is retreating from the planet. Whereas when it's a full moon, where it's a very different energy that we run. But with that, you can be, strategizing everything. Your corpus callosum, which is the center of your brain, for the non-nerds. You're all nerds. You just don't know it yet. I haven't converted you. It helps both lobes of your brain communicate stronger. So it's a great time in that follicular phase to move towards that strategy and start strategizing things and then start making your changes, like your kick-ass nature comes up near ovulation. And then as you move into the luteal phase, you're way more articulate. So I was actually doing an interview in person for Schmidt's podcast. You guys you'll have to hear the reference for it. And I was talking about this of like, oh yeah, in the early luteal phase, like you're like a straight up wordsmith. Like it's so easy to flow, but I was falling all over my words. And I'm like, by the way, I'm on my period right now. And that's what's going on because I'm like, I can't get the words out. No, does it mean that like, oh, does that mean, oh, I'm the lesser or, oh, now I'm weaker? No, it just meant that like, I had to be in a situation trying to leverage superpowers that, like, it wasn't time for those superpowers. Like, it would have behooved me to be like, let's strategize, like, what I'm going to be talking about and get ready my talks and line everything up. And, like, what are we going to be, like, sharing with our community and how will we get it out there? Like, that's really where I should have been in terms of my energy, my cycle. But it's like, I could still perform and be there and be able to speak. But, like, had I just ovulated and been moving into the luteal phase, I would have been way more articulate.
Yeah.
And interestingly, there is also a component of healing the brain in all of this. So there have been studies on soccer players who get hit in the head a lot, as you can imagine. But they get hit in the head and they suffer a concussion. If they're in their follicular phase, then a month later, they have less deficits than a woman in her luteal phase. Well, what was going on? This woman got hit in the head. She ovulates. Progesterone comes up. It decreases brain inflammation. It's very nourishing. It helps those immune activated cells not get too crazy in cleaning up the mess of the brain from the injury. But if you're in the luteal phase, you get to the place where, boom, progesterone drops. Now you're at the mercy of estrogen rising, causing brain inflammation. By the way, nobody vilify estrogen. We all need estrogen. It's very, there's been a trend. I mean, have you noticed where people are like, estrogen's the devil?
Yeah,
and it's like,
everyone wants to lower their estrogen.
Yeah, but it's like everyone wants to lower their estrogen as we sit in Hollywood where people also are getting breast augmentation. And it's like, well, we got to find that sweet spot because estrogen is what gives you your curves.
And it's more the form of estrogen, right?
Absolutely.
That's what we want to work on. So that was really empowering, even as a man, hearing it from this side. I'm like, wow, I wonder if us men have rhythms like this, right?
I know, I don't study you guys as much, but that's why I'm like, we're cyclical creatures. Like daily, we have our cycles. Now, all humans do. We all follow our circadian rhythm. Chinese medicine has been saying it for like thousands of years. Research is just now showing, oh, they were right. Your organs do go on these biological clocks. And like, that's something that's, again, where we need the humility instead of coming out and be like, we have shown this in the science. We have to be like, but we only questioned it because, all these Chinese medicine practitioners brought it up so many times.
Yeah. Okay, so with saying this conversation, when it comes to getting pregnant,
I like the way you say that.
Yeah, getting pregnant. It was because it was like ambiguous. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. From my side, I don't want anyone getting pregnant right now. But we're being real, right?
No, I'm totally cracking up. You're like, it's not my time.
Not right now.
No, it's not ticking.
So women have been told basically one thing about their pregnancy, when in reality, you can get pregnant at how many days in the month?
Oh, this is so ridiculous.
Yeah,
so, but for real, like in the United States, majority of the states do not mandate scientifically accurate sex education. So what was I told? Because I had really religious parents, they told me, like, you can get pregnant any time of the month. Any time of the month. My mom, I remember being in the back of the minivan, her yelling at me, if you're on your period, you can still get pregnant. I was like, why are we even talking about this? Like, I'm just trying to chill in the minivan and listen to my Walkman. Like, what's going on here?
With your flannel around your waist.
Yeah, with my flannel. Yeah, I probably had a fanny pack too. Yeah. Throwing it back. They're back in style though. I was just living in Paris and there's actually designer, like we're talking $3,000, $5,000 like euro fanny packs. This is a tangent. I'm just mind blown of like side ponytails. How much are those going to cost us when those come back?
Yeah, okay. But it's not only hormones that are cyclical. Fashion is too, right?
Yeah, fashion is cyclical as well. So, yeah, I mean, this is the reality though in women's medicine. Is it's usually not until a woman wants to get pregnant that she's taught when that can happen. But not even then. Like I just had someone write me and they were like, "I want to get pregnant. My doctor said to have sex every other day." And I was like, okay, well, that's fun. I mean, that's good. Yeah, if you enjoy that. But like, really, there's this window. And when I talked her through it, she wrote me back a month later, pregnant. She's like, we'd been trying forever. And now here we are pregnant. And she's like, and I just did exactly what you said. It was like, look for the fertile cervical mucus. Yeah. Like, so this is what a lot of us are taught. And it was, I mean, I come from a heavy science background. I had 2 physiology classes talking about the menstrual cycle before I ever got to medical school. And it wasn't until I was there and they were like, okay, fertility class, a woman wants to get pregnant. Here's the one day out of the month she's pregnant. One day out of the month. And that was part of my light bulb moment of like, wait a minute, I'm suppressing my hormones every day and I'm taking this medication that doesn't make me feel awesome, but I've been so afraid of pregnancy.
For one day.
For one day.
Yeah.
And yet the fertile window is, 5 to 6 days because your sperm be tricky. Sperm is tricky and it can live longer.
They just hang out, huh?
They hang out. But the other thing, so I used to teach biology, and there are other mammals who actually will capture and store sperm. So if anybody who's ever listened to me prior, years before, they've heard me say this of like, you get in the mood, that's your body being smart because you'll have sex, you'll capture sperm. Then when you ovulate, you have a higher, probability that sperm and egg will meet. And then this research came out and said, there actually might be a little storage mechanism that like the female body has. And it's like, well, yeah, of course. Like there's other mammals that have this. Yeah. They have these crypts where they store sperm. They can store it more than a week. I mean, they can store it for a long time because, that's an evolutionary adaptation of like, well, maybe they capture the sperm, they met that male, but they don't know when the environment's going to be safe. Like they need to go find food, they need to get to a place. And so it's a very interesting adaptation that, when that research was blowing up, my husband's like, did you know that? Like you said that before. Did you read a different study on that? I'm like, no, it's just how it's just that we forget as humans that we're animals and we're a lot like other mammals. But reality is one day out of the month. And yet we get miseducation left and right. I mean, there are still women who are being told that they can get pregnant from all different kinds of ways other than just having like penis meets vagina sex kind of intercourse going on. And so it's a very interesting time right now to have social media. Like I think back, there was no internet when I was a kid and going through this. But now, women can get access to this information. They can also get access to misinformation. And like to think that they trust like their teachers in school. And so there's actually a section of my book that's like what your sex ed teacher got wrong. Like, let's go through that because, my sex ed teacher, when I finally had sex ed, was like a health teacher, not much training in health at all. And I think back to like, great, I could put a condom on a banana, but like that's important because condoms have a high failure rate when not used appropriately. Mm-hmm. But like, what about the conversation about just like how did my body work? Like, why was sex ed so focused on sex? Like the threat of pregnancy is something we should all fear. It's a piece of it, but it's actually really easy to avoid when you know what's going on with your body. It is very hard though, I will say this. You can practice fertility awareness method. You can use barrier methods, all this other stuff. When you're a teenager and your frontal lobe has not developed and your brain, sorry, men, there are other men in the room you guys can't even see. I'm going to say this, but your brains, they get the override by hormones a lot easier in terms of like when it comes to like, it's time for sex, it's sexy time. The brain's like, I'm not even thinking, like I just can't even function. Like this is what's happening. And so just to say that like, while I make it really simple, like it's one day out of the month and this and that, we also have to educate teenagers in that like, your hormones are really, like, if you've seen The Hormone Monster on Netflix, it's real. It's funny because it's real. Like, we all, like, laugh about it because we're just like, oh, my God, this is all this stuff that we're told we're not supposed to talk about.
Yeah.
But hello, mammals. Hello, animals. This is what really goes on.
It's always fascinating to me how society suppresses one of our innate impulses to have sex and reproduce.
As if it's naughty.
As if it's naughty. There's shame put around something that, again, we can do responsibly had there been proper education, right? Comprehensive education, empowering education. And it's something you're doing. So I would think even further, because I just tend to think in my generation, but even younger generations who pick up the book, you should feel good that a lot of these young women are going to be able to read it and get all of the stuff that they should have been learning in school.
Totally. And that's something that, some of the best comments I've gotten are from moms who are like, I bought the book, I read it for myself, I'm getting my hormones optimized, and then there was this one mom, this is so sweet, she passed it to her 19-year-old daughter who was contemplating birth control, and then she said that her 19-year-old daughter is reading it out loud to her 16-year-old daughter every night, and they're going through it together. Like, I want to cry right now because I'm just like, I didn't have a sister like that, and like I would have loved to have that, but like just to think like multiple generations. And then I have women who are in their 60s reading the book being like, I finally know what's going on. I don't have periods anymore. But to just know I wasn't crazy, it wasn't in my head, what I was experiencing wasn't normal. Like for every time I was dismissed, I finally feel validated. And like that was not, I didn't see that coming. That was like unintentional healing on next level of women going back and being like, well, I struggled for decades. Now I finally have made peace with that struggle, and I don't have that stigma and that dogma that I'm carrying like a weight with me.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, you're transcending. Okay, so before, like towards the end of this, I love environmental toxicity. I love environmental medicine.
You like environmental toxicity?
I love learning about it.
Yeah, just
exactly.
teasing
Thanks.
you.
But it's just so important because the relationship we have to environment is you sort of having implications in so many diseases, and there's nothing definitive. We're learning more and more, especially in my realm, and now how sensitive hormones are. How much of a threat is something like BPA for hormones?
So much. And I have to actually share that last night I was on Instagram. I am Sahara Rose. I love her Instagram account.
We're going to get her on here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
She's great. I haven't met her in person. I just like came across her, I think like 6 weeks ago, and I was like, who is this amazing person? Like, love her. It was a picture of a stingray, I believe it was a stingray, swimming in the ocean in Hawaii, and just so much trash. And I showed it to my husband, and he was like, oh, is this like an environmental Instagram account? Like they're highlighting this problem? I'm like, this, and I scrolled through her feed and I showed him the whole account, and I was like, this is somebody talking about doshas, talking about Ayurveda, like, you know, meditating, like this, look at her feed. And this is her in the water in Hawaii. And like we both like lost it. It was probably a good 90 minutes of us yelling back and forth about it because, you know, and he grew up a surfer and near the ocean. And to think that in the last 10 years, I could go snorkeling, I could get in the water, and like you barely saw trash, and how rapidly we are seeing this. And we think that like this is a problem. We are very removed from our food supply. So we have ethical issues and all these conversations that take place that like we're not close enough to our food source, and we're not close enough to our waste either, which nobody wants to be close to their waist, and I totally get that. And there's that, you know, that cholera thing and all that. There's that. But it's more of like, we don't see where our trash goes. Like, we don't see what happens to it. And so we feel this disconnect. We also have been taught, and this idea that's been perpetuated in society, that we're top of the food chain, we're the best of the best, and so like nothing else matters, so to speak. And whether it's consciously being said to you, there is an undercurrent of that, of like, you deserve to buy everything in the world and to not have to worry about plastic or where that's going or any of those things. And I grew up with Captain Planet, and so I think a lot about that, of like, we had to have a cartoon, and yet look at where we're still at. And so with this, why I bring all of this up, and it's important for us to understand, is that women will say, like, I don't drink out of plastic, or I make sure that, like, I buy, you know, these things or do these things, and that's great, and it's a great step. However, we also have to recognize what's in our environment. Now, these environmental toxins, which are xenoestrogens, I say they act like estrogen in all the wrong ways. They grab onto your receptors and they misbehave as like crazy. We're also coming to understand, so there's been this theory of autoimmunity. Dr. Fasano came up with this, and I talk about it in my book, which is that you've got to have 3 ingredients. This is the way I say it. It's ingredients. Anytime I can talk about food, that's what I want to do. So you have to have genetics, you have to have intestinal permeability, the hyperintestinal permeability, more specifically leaky gut, and you need to have a triggering event. But now we're starting to understand that these environmental toxins can circumvent the genetics. And so in which, like, Dr. Karazian was an early mentor of mine. If you guys don't know who he is, look him up. He's amazing.
I've seen him talk.
Yeah.
He's awesome.
So he's like where I got my foundation in thyroid health. Like in my first year of naturopathic medical school, I found him at a conference. I was like, you are going to mentor me. We're going to be friends. And he actually came out with a study where they were like, people ingest BPA. Not all the BPA comes out. Where's it going? And actually showing that it can grab the proteins, meet BPA, and boom, autoimmunity with someone who didn't have the genetics for it. Like, something is going on. And we have to acknowledge that, yes, there's the effect on hormones, but these environmental toxins are affecting everything. Why? Are we seeing the highest rates of autism, of autoimmunity, of infertility, of degenerative brain disease, like all of these things going on? And people, we always want to point to one thing. And yes, I can point to the pill as contributing to all of this, but there's environmental toxins as well. And the reality is that when we approach a human, and this is very much naturopathic philosophy, is that we have to look at the bucket. And we have to look at how full is their bucket. And this is especially important when we talk about something like cancer risk while you're on birth control, is that doctors will be like, no, it's like 20% increased risk and it's not that big of a deal and like, don't worry about it. But did you ask, where did she grow up? Did she grow up being sprayed with pesticides or near a Superfund site? Does she eat organic? Like, what does she put on her face every day? What is she living in her environment with? Did her mom get exposed to chemicals? Like, there are all of these factors that come into play, and why they matter is because, well, your body might be handling the detox and dealing with the environmental toxins and all that. The pill may come in and be one more drop in the bucket that causes the thing to overflow. Yeah. Exactly. And so, this is something that's really near and dear to my heart. My one of my favorite residents, I don't know if I should pick favorites, but I have a resident in my clinic, and I love her. But her 5-year-old was diagnosed with multiple ovarian cancers at 5. And what they found out later is that she was on a Superfund site at a very young age. And it's something that, like, she had done just about everything right, but she didn't know that. Like, she did not know that because of, there's a lot of factors, politics, all kinds of things, but she didn't know that. But I think about those kinds of situations of like what we didn't know and like, what can we do about that? There's not a whole lot that we can do about what we didn't know or what was happening before. There's so much you can do today. And the power of healing. We all just made faces because there was some loud noise. But the power of healing and what it takes to stay out of the doctor's office and to stay away from those big, scary, the big, scary diagnosis is what you do every day. And it's what you put at the end of your fork. It is how you talk to yourself. Also, something that's really overlooked is that you can talk nice to yourself and it can lower inflammation quicker than like meditation in some people. How powerful is that? And how many of us are taught to hate on ourselves because that sells a product, which then goes into the environment. It is all connected.
It is all connected. And that's why I preach in so many ways the power of what self-love, self-meditation, self-dialogue, connection with yourself.
See, this is why you need a Sahara Rose on now.
That'll be a great conversation that we'll have. I mean, Ayurveda will be a wonderful topic too. That's exactly what I say. Drops in the bucket, drops in the bucket, drops in the bucket. And that's why I'm passionate about environmental medicine, is because we don't know, right? You can eat impeccably. You can work out every day, and you can still be diagnosed with a multitude of diseases because it's a lot of the environment too. And in many ways, we can empower ourselves to understand that, maybe not change our past, but understand that.
But I mean, that's something that like we need to dollar vote now. With like, I mean, I remember when I started dating my husband and I was eating organic, and he was like, you have to go out of your way for organic, and it's so expensive. But I mean, I remember when I was eating organic, and there was this little tiny stinky health food store because it had like all the herbs and everything I didn't understand, like all this plant smell, that you had to go to get organic, or the one booth at the farmer's market that would have organic. And now look, like we do have the power. We think we don't, that we really do have the power to create that change. But there's also a really big problem in that the burden lies like it happens with like drugs as well. It's like drugs enter the market, environmental toxins enter the market. These things enter the market. They get used ubiquitously, and then we ask questions later. And it's like the burden of proof are on the people who are like, let's just hold back and question this for a minute. It's not on the people who are like, let's introduce something to the environment that we can never take back. Like that is baffling to me.
Yep, baffling. And doesn't that also reemphasize how much power we have in it's crazy because these companies that'll be poisoning us, if we vote with our dollar, they'll be the first ones to make something organic too. Well, we're making organic soda.
Totally.
Organic sugar drinks.
Well, and we're seeing like these bigger corporations, and people are like, this is a terrible thing. Big corporations are buying things like Epic Bar and buying Primal Kitchen.
RX Bar.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like, but they actually like, that's like a good turning of the current where they're like, wait a minute, consumers actually want these products and they'll pay more for them. Corporations for a long time thought that like we wanted the cheapest, didn't care what was in it product, as long as it was cheap and it tasted good, which, some people that's still their jam. Yeah. But now they're starting to shift and they're making those changes. And it's something that like, read your labels, people, make sure they hold it up and they're still doing their due diligence. But it is a thing to see that like we actually have the influence to shift a corporation away from like what has been their primary their primary products towards products that are more fringe.
Yeah. And again, we're so powerful and we don't even know it. And that's what I try to do here and just empower people. So, all right. So if I'm a teenage girl in 8th grade, not wearing overalls, whatever the trend is. All right.
What is the trend?
I don't know what the trend is. Whatever.
Not that cool.
Whatever Jenner's doing, Kylie Jenner. Probably.
See, I had a moment where I was like, Jenner, who?
Yeah, whatever she's doing, but probably. What is one piece of advice that you would tell me to let me know that, hey, I can empower myself as a young girl?
Well, that no one else lives in your body but you. So you're the only one who knows what your normal is. And that your period problems are actually signals from the body and an opportunity to address that root issue. And so that's chapter 4 of my book, which is like, you have heavy periods, this is what to investigate. Doctor should test this. Here's what you do right now. You have painful periods, here's what to do right now. I mean, simple things like you have painful periods. Like this is so bad. I would plug in the electric blanket and hold it against my reproductive organs. I don't even want to know about the EMFs that was letting off back in the day. But to know that like you can get magnesium oil and actually rub that on your pelvis. You can take a magnesium supplement if you need to. You can make sure you're pooping every day. You can track your symptoms and see when your acne outbreak is and then intervene. Like you can build your own user manual and really like this is what scientists do. Observe, hypothesis, test it, observe. Like you can do that in your own body and build your user manual to understand yourself better than anyone else. I mean, that is amazing. I wish anyone had told me that before of like, how you're counting that down as doomsday, X is on your calendar. That's actually cool that and you can predict when your period comes. And like, so, I mean, it's something like when we talk about acne, it's estimated that almost 60% of women who are given hormonal birth control, the primary reason is for symptom management. Acne constitutes about 14% of that. It's something I have real talk in my book about of like, you might have acne because of PCOS and what you may be trading is clear skin for risk of diabetes or risk of a heart attack. And like, that is something that like, if you told my 14-year-old self that, I'd be like, that's an old people thing. Yeah, it is. And it starts when you're 14. Yeah. It's just when it started. Sorry. Like that's the reality of it. But you can actually, start to understand your body a lot better, start to work with it. And with acne, if you break out and you're like, oh, it's just before ovulation, that's testosterone levels rising. Can we get zinc in? Can we make sure maybe you need a little saw palmetto? Like, you could have a little bit of nettle root coming in, like these simple things that you could make dietary practices and bring in. Maybe you're having acne just before your period comes because of the imbalance of progesterone and estrogen ratio. Getting seed cycling on board, making sure you have fiber for elimination. I mean, this is something so many times I ask this question to my patients. They're like, I had a breakout and they seem to come out of nowhere when it's not cyclical. And I'm like, how are your bowels leading up to that? Oh, I was constipated. There you go. Waste has got to get out one way or another. And when they identify that, they're like, okay, when I travel, I take magnesium citrate with me. So I make sure I keep my bowels moving because that's a trigger for me. When you start to figure that out, you can work with your body and then you understand your threshold so that you're like, dairy's my trigger. I can have a piece of cheese, I'm fine. I have 5 pieces of cheese, I have acne.
I'm going to the bathroom, I have acne and all those things. That's wonderful. I'm so happy that you're able to educate not only women our generation, but the younger generation. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming here.
Thany you for the nerdy bugs.
Yeah.
I even saw you, my boy, Albert Einstein in the back.
Oh, we have Tesla, we have Einstein, we have all of these people who've influenced me a little bit. This is
like a nerdy art room. You weren't kidding.
I know. Yeah. This is the way it comes out. But
I want to say Albert Einstein, legit genius, is the one who said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. So Take that to heart, ladies. If your doctor gives you hormonal birth control and it didn't work, and then they give you a new one and a new one, that is the definition of sanity. Like right there, legit genius said it, not Dr. Brighten.
How do I even top that outro? That was like perfect in every single way. Thank you, doctor, for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay.